Forgiveness and healing. At a major conference held at a church in Chicago, Mamie Till Mobley gave an emotional speech. Although she was elderly by this time, her spirit remained strong. She told about her son's passing and the years she lived in that pain. "I've lived with this pain my whole life," Mamie began, her voice trembling with emotion. "But I believe that only forgiveness can heal these wounds. I forgive, not because they deserve it, but because I deserve to live without hate." The audience stood and applauded, not in excitement, but in deep admiration for her courage and grace. Mamie had not allowed her pain to consume her. Instead, she had transformed it into a force for change and healing. An enduring legacy. The Emmett Till case is more than just a personal tragedy. It became a symbol of the struggle for justice and hope for a better future. In 2022, the state of Mississippi decided to erect a memorial to Emmett Till near the Tallahatchie River, where his body was once discarded. The dedication ceremony was attended by civil rights activists and people who had witnessed the civil rights movement's rise in the 1960s. A civil rights leader at the ceremony declared, "Today, we not only commemorate Emmett Till, but we also remember all those who have suffered racial injustice over the centuries." This memorial is not just a reminder of the past, but a call for what we must do for the future. The statue of Emmett Till stood tall by the Tallahatchie River, a solemn reminder to everyone who visited that justice does not always come immediately, but truth and courage will never be forgotten. Conclusion. Many years have passed since Emmett Till passed away, but his story remains alive in the memory of America. His brutal murder was not forgotten, and it became the spark that ignited the civil rights movement. The story of the 14-year-old boy proved that the worst aspects of society could become the driving force for changing the world. The bus horn blared like a harsh reminder as Amara stepped onto the street. She wasn't the only one feeling the injustice. Hundreds of other students also endured the same lack of opportunities each day. But today, her dissatisfaction reached its peak when she witnessed something she couldn't accept. On her way home, Amara noticed a new billboard. Large white letters on a bright blue background announced, "Full scholarships for Charter Ridge students." Charter Ridge was one of the most prestigious private schools in the city, with advanced programs and diverse extracurriculars, things Amara had always dreamed of. Injustice was no longer an abstract concept for Amara. It was real, a feeling of being left behind and denied opportunities. For a moment, she felt a surge of anger rise within her, stronger than any disappointment she had felt before. She wanted to do something. "Do you think we can change anything?" Jamal's voice came from behind her. Jamal, another student at Red Oak, was always eager to fight against the injustices they faced. He had tried to organize small discussions at school many times, but the administration always shut them down. Amara turned to Jamal, noticing an unusual glimmer of hope in his eyes. "I don't know," she replied. "But I think if we keep silent, we'll always be trapped here." Jamal nodded in agreement. "Tonight, we're meeting at the community center. I've gathered some people to discuss this." The community center, an old but welcoming building, had always been a gathering spot for those seeking change. As Amara and Jamal entered, she saw about 20 people already there, from students to parents, even a few young teachers. They all shared a desire to transform the unjust education system. "Thank you all for coming," Jamal began the discussion with a determined voice. "We all know that the current policies are depriving black students at Red Oak of opportunities available at other schools. This is unfair and unacceptable." Amara listened intently. Each word from Jamal cut deeper into her sense of helplessness. But this time, that feeling was accompanied by a flicker of hope. She felt the unity among everyone present, from the resolute eyes to the clenched fists. "I think what we need is a clear strategy." Amara suddenly spoke up, making everyone turn to look at her. "If we want change, we need a concrete plan and a way to draw the attention of the broader community." A parent responded, "We could start by gathering signatures to demand the city invest more in our school. If we get enough signatures, they'll have no choice but to listen." Amara nodded. This was the first step, perhaps the only way to make the authorities acknowledge the injustice occurring here. As discussions continued, she felt the strength of unity clearly, but she also knew that the road ahead would not be easy. Battles against injustice are often long, requiring patience and courage. As the meeting ended, Amara left the community center feeling more determined than ever. She understood that this fight wasn't just for herself, it was for an entire generation oppressed by the system. "Do you think we can really do this?" Kayla asked as she and Amara walked home. Amara turned to her friend, feeling a surge of determination. "Absolutely," she said confidently, "as long as we don't give up." As the sun began to rise, a cold wind swept through the yard of Red Oak. Amara and Jamal stood at the school gate, holding flyers urging people to sign a petition demanding better educational conditions at Red Oak. The flyers, with bold letters reading, "Don't abandon us," were a silent yet firm plea from the students overlooked by the system. "How many signatures do you think we'll get today?" Jamal asked, his eyes filled with determination, but also hints of anxiety. Amara replied, her voice resolute, "We just need a start. The important thing is to make people aware and get them involved." As more students arrived, Amara and Jamal tirelessly called for support. Many students stopped to sign, but many others walked by with skeptical looks. Some even mocked them. "You really think these papers can change anything?" Amara kept smiling and trying to persuade each person, but deep down she knew the fear of failure was always there. She understood that to truly make change, they needed more than just empathy. They needed action. By afternoon, a group of young teachers approached Amara and Jamal. "We've heard about your efforts," Miss Thompson, a young and passionate teacher, said. "We want to help. Tell us what you need." Amara's eyes lit up with new hope. The involvement of teachers was a crucial turning point, as it could draw more attention from the press and local authorities. "We need to expand the petition's reach," Jamal explained. "And maybe we should organize a school forum to garner more community support." Just as Amara felt things were moving in a positive direction, an unexpected event occurred. The school administration suddenly ordered the flyers to be confiscated and banned students from collecting signatures on campus. A notice was posted on the school's main bulletin board with bold words, "No gathering or political activities allowed." Amara couldn't believe her eyes. The system's resistance became evident just as their struggle had begun. Frustrated and angry, she immediately called Jamal and other friends to discuss their next steps. "They're scared," Kayla observed. "If they weren't, they wouldn't have reacted so harshly." Jamal agreed, his voice firm. "We can't let them shut this down. We need to keep going, but we have to change our approach." In the small room at the community center, they discussed new strategies. Kayla suggested they hold a forum off campus, inviting the press and social activists to increase pressure on the administration. "We need to leverage the media," Amara said. "If the authorities and community know about this injustice, they won't be able to ignore it forever." That evening, Amara returned home with greater resolve than ever before. But as she stepped through the door, her mother, Mrs. Yvette, was waiting at the kitchen table, her face tense. "Amara, I heard about what you're doing at school," she said, her voice a mix of worry and fatigue. "I'm proud of you for standing up, but I'm also scared they'll retaliate." Amara looked at her mother with empathetic yet determined eyes. "I understand, Mom, but if we don't do anything, things will stay the same forever." Mrs. Yvette was silent for a long moment, then sighed. "I just want you to be safe. But if this is what you truly believe in, I'll support you all the way." Amara stepped forward to hug her mother, feeling the warmth and support that seemed to strengthen her resolve. She knew that great struggles often entail loss and danger, but she also understood that this was a battle that needed to be fought, not only for herself, but for future generations. The next morning, Amara and her group began preparing for the largest rally they had ever organized. Speeches were written, the media had been invited, and above all, Amara's determination had never been stronger. She sensed that an undercurrent was rising, but she believed it would be the first step toward dismantling the invisible barriers that had existed for too long. The day of the outdoor rally that Amara and her team had worked tirelessly to organize finally arrived. In a public park not far from Red Oak, colorful posters were displayed, information tables were set up, and loudspeakers were arranged to ensure that every voice could be heard. Excitement filled the air, mingling with an inevitable hint of tension. Amara stood among the crowd, scanning both familiar and unfamiliar faces. The attendees were not only students and teachers from Red Oak, but also activists, parents from other schools, and a few local journalists. This support was a clear sign that they were gaining the attention and solidarity of the community. Jamal approached and gave Amara a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "Today, everything depends on us. Don't let the pressure break you." Amara smiled, trying to conceal the anxiety creeping inside. "I know," she replied. "We have to stay strong." The rally began with Jamal's speech. He spoke about the inequities in the education system, the stifled dreams, and the need for comprehensive reform. Amara listened with a pounding heart. When it was her turn to speak, the crowd fell silent as if holding its breath. "We are not just fighting for ourselves," Amara declared, each word ringing with conviction. "We are fighting for all the children who have been forgotten, denied opportunities, and defined by injustice. Thunderous applause erupted, but it was quickly drowned out by the shrill sirens of approaching police cars. A group of officers arrived, their expressions stern and determined. They had come to disperse the gathering. "You don't have a permit to organize here," one officer said coldly. "We require everyone to disperse immediately." Amara looked around, catching the anxious glances of the crowd. This was the biggest challenge they had faced since the movement began. She knew that if they retreated now, all their efforts would be in vain. "We're not doing anything wrong," she whispered to Jamal. "We're simply demanding our rightful opportunities." Jamal nodded, but the tension was clear on his face. "But we must ensure everyone's safety." At that moment, Amara knew she had to make a difficult decision: to continue resisting or to withdraw temporarily to protect the group. Her heart urged her not to back down, but her mind reminded her of the potential consequences, especially for the young participants. She took a deep breath, stepped forward, and addressed the crowd loudly. "We won't stop here. Today we take a step back, but we will return, stronger and more prepared." The crowd seemed to understand her decision. People gradually dispersed, but not in disappointment. They knew this fight would be long and would require strategic moves. Amara had chosen a tactical retreat to preserve their strength, demonstrating her growing maturity as a leader. Once the crowd dispersed, Amara felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. She gazed into the distance, where police cars still stood as if dominating the entire space. Jamal approached her quietly. "You did the right thing. Sometimes knowing when to retreat is as important as knowing when to advance." Amara nodded, but anger still simmered within. She knew that this struggle wasn't just about petitions or outdoor rallies. It was about changing a system that had persisted for decades, one that wouldn't easily yield. That evening, Amara returned home, physically and mentally drained. But she knew this was just the beginning. Her mother, Mrs. Yvette, looked at her with a mix of worry and pride. "You did very well, Amara," she said. "I believe you will accomplish great things." Amara managed a weak smile, but her eyes remained bright. She knew that every revolution faces setbacks and mistakes. What mattered was to never give up. With renewed determination and a clearer strategy, Amara knew her next step had to be smarter and bolder. She needed to capture the attention of national media and human rights organizations, ensuring that Red Oak's story wasn't just about one school, but became a symbol of a nationwide movement. In the small room at the community center, Amara, Jamal, and the core members of their group gathered around an old wooden table. On the table was a city map, with carefully marked points. Today's meeting was not just to discuss strategy, but to finalize their boldest move yet, organizing a night protest in the heart of downtown Millstone. "We need to capture media attention," Kayla spoke up, her eyes shining with determination. "If we only organize at Red Oak, this story will remain just about our school. We need to make the whole city see what's happening." Jamal nodded in agreement. "I've reached out to some independent journalists and human rights activists. They've promised to be present and help with the coverage. But organizing a night protest was a risky decision." Amara knew that the dangers were not only from the police, but also from opposing groups that might show up to disrupt the event. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her shoulders, but also recognized that this was their only chance to elevate the movement. "I understand this is a big risk," Amara said, looking directly into each person's eyes. "But I believe that if we want real change, we have to be ready to face it." Everyone nodded in unison, their resolve stronger than ever. The following night, as darkness fell, Amara and her group were ready at the city's central square. Banners bearing bold words, "Justice for Red Oak, Justice for all children," were raised high. The glow of torches and flashlights lit up the darkness like small beacons of hope. Amara stepped onto a makeshift podium built from an old wooden crate. Her voice rang out in the stillness, filled with determination and emotion. "We are not here today to cause trouble, but to demand justice. We are not asking for privilege, only for fair rights for all children." Cheers erupted from the crowd, creating an atmosphere of unity and enthusiasm like never before. But within minutes, the peace began to dissolve as police sirens blared from the distance. The police force was deployed, with trucks carrying riot officers moving closer. Jamal rushed over to Amara, his face showing clear concern. "We have to be ready for anything. If violence breaks out, we must stay calm and avoid retaliation." Amara nodded, but deep down, she felt an overwhelming sense of anticipation. Tonight's struggle was not just about fairness, but also about courage and patience. "Everyone, stay calm," Amara called out. But just then, a police officer speaking through a loudspeaker made an announcement, that echoed across the square. "This gathering is unauthorized and must disperse immediately. If not, we will use force." The crowd began to stir, and a few people showed signs of unease. But Amara stood her ground, taking the microphone with unwavering determination. "We have the right to speak out. This is our freedom of speech, and we will not back down." The police advanced steadily, their faces set with resolve. Suddenly, one officer attempted to pull down a protester, causing a commotion within the crowd. Amara witnessed it unfold before her eyes and knew that this was their greatest test yet. "No violence! No violence!" Amara shouted, trying to maintain calm among the crowd. She stepped off the podium, moving closer to the police with her hands raised high, a symbol of non-resistance. A journalist quickly snapped a photo of the moment, hoping that Amara's courage would send a powerful message of persistence. However, amidst the chaos, a tear gas shot was fired, and a dense cloud of smoke began to spread across the square. Amara's eyes burned, and her breathing became labored, but she did not run. She stood her ground, holding a banner, her gaze defiant. The fire within her remained undiminished. In fact, it burned brighter than ever. Jamal pulled Amara aside, trying to help her escape the smoke. "We have to retreat temporarily, Amara. This is dangerous," he shouted, his voice drowned out by the noise and sirens. But Amara met Jamal's eyes, her voice trembling but determined. "I know, but this is only the beginning, Jamal. We will not stop." With the help of the group, Amara and the protesters began to retreat safely from the square. They didn't win tonight, but they hadn't lost either. Images from the protest quickly spread across social media, becoming a symbol of the determination and bravery of a young generation refusing to bow down to injustice. On Quadim. 2 days after the intense protest in downtown Millstone, Amara sat quietly by her window, gazing out at the empty street. Her body was weary, but her spirit remained steadfast. The protest wasn't a failure, but a stepping stone for greater momentum. The images of her standing amidst the tear gas had spread widely across social media and made headlines in major newspapers. Many human rights organizations were beginning to take notice of her movement. "Amara, you have a visitor," her mother's voice called from downstairs. Amara walked down, surprised to see an elegant black woman standing at the door. She wore a neatly tailored suit and a badge that read, "Patricia Gaines, representative of the National Justice Alliance." "Hello, Amara," Patricia greeted warmly. "I'm here to meet you and your team. We've been following your efforts, and I think we can help each other." In the simple living room, Amara, Jamal, and Kayla sat across from Patricia, who detailed how her organization could support their movement. Patricia pledged both financial and legal support, helping Amara's group organize larger events and gain more media coverage to elevate Red Oak's story to the national level. "We can't fight for you, but we can help ensure your voices are heard more widely," Patricia explained. "However, you should be prepared for more complex confrontations with the authorities." Amara listened intently. This offer was a tremendous opportunity, but it also meant the struggle would become more dangerous, potentially leading to unforeseen consequences. "We know what we're up against," she said slowly but firmly, "and we're ready to take this risk, as long as it brings us closer to justice." 2 weeks later, with the support of the National Justice Alliance, Amara and her team organized a massive march at the Millstone City Hall. Thousands of people poured in from all over the city, including teachers, parents, and even students from other schools. The scene in front of City Hall resembled a sea of people, holding banners and chanting for justice and reform. Standing on the podium, Amara felt overwhelmed by the sheer number of supporters. This time, there were no police efforts to break up the gathering, and no threats of violence. The crowd's eyes were filled with hope and trust, bolstering her confidence in the change they were creating. "Today, we don't just stand for Red Oak," Amara began her speech. "We stand for every child who has ever been denied opportunities just because they were born in the wrong place or with the wrong skin color." Thunderous applause followed. As Amara looked down at the crowd, she saw her mother, Yvette, shedding tears of joy. This fight was not just about the school, it was about social justice and the equality that everyone deserved. However, just as everything seemed to be heading in a positive direction, devastating news struck. The city administration announced plans to shut down Red Oak due to budget constraints and inadequate academic performance. It was a major blow to the community, especially to Amara and her team. "They're trying to kill this movement by erasing where it all started," Jamal said, his voice filled with anger. "We can't let them do that." Amara felt cornered. This was the most severe blow the authorities could deliver, threatening to crush the spirit of those who had supported her. But at the same time, It was a challenge that would test the resilience of the movement. We need to respond immediately, Amara declared resolutely. If they want to close Red Oak, we'll stage a sit-in at the school gates, day and night, until they reverse this decision. In the following days, Amara's group began the sit-in protest at Red Oak's gates. They set up tents, prepared food and water, and called for more support from the community. It was a long, grueling struggle, but Amara believed it was also their last chance to protect the school and their dreams. One night, as Amara sat by the tents with Kayla, she sighed. "Do you think we can win?" Kayla took Amara's hand, her eyes filled with determination. "We've come this far. I don't know how it'll end, but I do know that if anyone can make a change, it's you, Amara." Kayla's words gave Amara renewed strength. Even though this fight was long and full of challenges, she knew they had formed a true coalition of hope. She and those around her wouldn't stop until justice was served, no matter what it cost. The rain poured down heavily on a Saturday morning, yet Amara, along with over 200 protesters, continued to sit resolutely in front of Red Oak's gates. Their determination remained strong, despite harsh weather and challenging conditions. They put up makeshift tarps for shelter and took turns standing guard, protecting their beloved school from the unjust closure. But the harsh reality of the sit-in also brought unavoidable tensions. Minor disputes started to arise among the protesters. The lack of food, water, and exhaustion made people irritable. One evening, while Amara and Kayla were distributing rations, a parent erupted in anger, accusing them of unfair distribution. "How can we trust you kids when everything is so scarce?" the parent asked, his voice tinged with frustration. Amara tried to stay calm, but she felt the pressure mounting. "We're doing our best to share everything equally," she replied gently. "But we need to stay united to keep moving forward." Amara knew that this fight was not just about educational equity, but also about maintaining trust among the movement's members. She realized that she needed to act to strengthen the spirit of unity. Otherwise, they would crumble before achieving their goals. In the midst of this tension, surprising news came from the National Justice Alliance. A group of volunteer lawyers was ready to support Amara's movement by suing the city government for civil rights violations and discrimination within the education system. This was a turning point that could change the entire dynamic of the struggle, but it also meant entering a new phase, a legal one that would be long and complex. During a meeting with Patricia and the lawyers at the community center, Amara listened attentively to the litigation plan. "We have ample evidence of the discrimination faced by students at Red Oak," one lawyer stated. "But we need you to be the lead witness in this case." Amara was taken aback by this request. Becoming the main witness wasn't just about appearing in court. It also meant exposing her personal life to the public. She understood that this could affect her future, her family, and her relationship with the community. "I'll do it," Amara replied after a moment of hesitation. "I will testify to what we've endured." In the days that followed, news of the lawsuit quickly spread across the city and even the country. Amara's movement received widespread support from human rights organizations, universities, and even public figures. Media attention brought new hope to the struggle, but also sparked a wave of backlash from those who opposed the movement. Amara started receiving anonymous threats. "Stop, or the consequences will be severe," one letter read, written in shaky, ominous handwriting. Amara maintained her composure, but her mother Yvette was more worried than ever. "Amara, I'm proud of you," she said, her eyes filled with emotion. "But I'm scared for your safety. Is this really worth it?" Amara looked at her mother, trying to keep her voice steady. "Mom, if we don't do this, no one else will. This isn't just about Red Oak, it's about kids like me all over the country." Yvette was silent for a long moment, then finally nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. She understood that her daughter was fighting for a better future, despite the dangers involved. The day of the trial arrived. Amara wore formal attire, but her heart raced as she stepped into the crowded courtroom. Outside, hundreds of supporters gathered with banners, ready to cheer for Amara and her movement. She felt the power of unity from those outside, giving her the courage she needed. Amara stood before the court, looking into the eyes of the judge and the representatives of the city government. "I'm here today to tell the truth," she began, her voice strong and unwavering. "The injustice we've faced cannot continue. This isn't just about our school, it's about the future of every child forgotten by this system." As Amara finished her statement, thunderous applause erupted from outside the courthouse, where supporters were waiting. It was a historic moment for the movement, but Amara knew that this battle was far from over. The autumn sun began to set as Amara entered the second hearing in the lawsuit against the city of Millstone. Her heart beat strongly, a mix of anxiety and hope. She had prepared for this day for months, but knew that every word and action could determine not just the outcome of the case, but the future of thousands of other students. Today, the courtroom was packed. Faces filled with worry, hope, and even skepticism were everywhere. Reporters lined the hallways, their cameras focused on Amara as she walked in. Chants from supporters echoed from outside, but she couldn't afford to be distracted by them. She needed to focus entirely on the task at hand, proving that the city government had violated the rights of Red Oak students. Amara's lawyer, Patricia, began by presenting evidence of the lack of funding and discrimination that Red Oak had faced for years. She laid out data on inequitable education budgets, harsh disciplinary measures, and restricted access to high-quality programs for students of color. "We have ample evidence that Red Oak students have been systematically discriminated against," Patricia declared, her voice clear and persuasive. "And the city government must be held accountable for this." Then came Amara's turn to testify. She stood before the court, her eyes determined yet revealing a hint of nervousness. She took a deep breath, ready to share the personal stories of injustice she and others had faced. Aware that this testimony would be pivotal, not just for the lawsuit, but for the movement she had helped build. "I am a student at Red Oak, and I have witnessed this injustice from a young age," Amara began. "We don't have new textbooks, our science labs are inadequate, and our teachers often lack the resources needed to teach. We are not only denied educational opportunities, but are treated as second-class citizens." She felt the eyes of everyone in the room on her, supporters and skeptics alike. This was the most critical moment of the trial, and she knew that every word would influence the outcome. Immediately after, the city's defense team presented a strong rebuttal. Their lawyer argued that the lack of investment in Red Oak was not a result of discrimination, but rather due to the city's limited budget, which required prioritizing other areas. "We have no intention of discriminating against anyone," the city's lawyer declared. "We are simply trying to allocate resources fairly based on the needs of the entire city." But Amara wasn't swayed. She knew that budget constraints were just an excuse, as other schools in the city continued to receive significant funding. Anger welled up inside her, but she knew she had to stay calm and patient. After the city concluded its arguments, Patricia countered with a powerful response. She highlighted evidence showing that schools in wealthier areas received significantly more funding and emphasized how this inequity created an unfair education system for students of color. "No one has the right to take away these children's futures," Patricia declared firmly. "We demand justice be served." As the trial continued, Amara and her team faced a series of external challenges. Some residents of the city began to criticize the movement, claiming it was causing division rather than unity. Opinion pieces appeared in local newspapers with headlines like, "The Red Oak Movement, Aggression or Reform?" and "Is this really about the students or just fame?" Amara felt attacked from all sides. The criticism, threats, and doubt from those who should have been supporting her were disheartening. One evening, she sat outside the tent in front of the school gates, staring at the empty road in the dark. Kayla approached and sat next to her, remaining silent for a moment before speaking. "Are you okay? I know you're under a lot of pressure." Amara sighed, her voice soft but filled with exhaustion. "I don't know if all of this is worth it, Kayla. I've started questioning if I'm doing the right thing." Kayla took Amara's hand, her eyes burning with resolve. "You've brought us this far, Amara. You've shown everyone the injustice we've been facing. Don't give up, because everyone is counting on you." Kayla's words rekindled Amara's strength. She knew that no matter how tough things got, she couldn't give up. She had to fight, not just for herself, but for everyone who believed in her. The final day of the trial arrived. A heavy, tense atmosphere filled the courtroom as the judge took the bench to deliver the verdict. Everyone fell silent, waiting for the words that would determine the future of Red Oak and the movement. After reviewing the evidence and testimonies from both sides, the judge began, his voice calm but serious. "I find that the students of Red Oak have been treated unfairly and denied equal educational opportunities." Amara felt her entire body flood with joy. This was the victory they had long awaited, proof of the resilience and determination of the entire movement. The judge continued to outline corrective measures, including increased funding for Red Oak, investment in new academic programs, and oversight from the state government to ensure educational equity. As Amara stepped out of the courtroom, she was met by hundreds of supporters. Cheers, hugs, and tears of joy created a heartwarming scene. Amara knew they had won, but it was only a small victory in the long fight for educational justice. The courtroom victory was a crucial turning point for Amara's movement, but she understood that the fight for educational equity was far from over. As the trial's buzz began to settle, activists, parents, and Red Oak students returned to their daily lives. But this time, they were no longer just the oppressed. They were people who had reclaimed their fundamental rights. With the court's ruling, the city government was compelled to reallocate its budget, invest in Red Oak, and improve academic programs. An independent oversight team was established to ensure that these changes were genuinely implemented. One morning, Amara and Jamal stepped into the school grounds where they had once staged sit-in protests. But this time, they weren't there to oppose. They were there to start a new chapter, implementing the reforms they had fought so hard to achieve. In a meeting with movement members and the Red Oak administration, Amara presented her plans for reform. We want new classes in coding, arts, and science. We also want to invest in the library to update learning materials and research resources, Amara declared, her voice filled with determination. The administration listened, but remained cautious. This will take time and cooperation from the city government, one board member noted. Amara knew that promises had to be closely monitored to avoid becoming empty words. She also understood that convincing the administration and the government was just the first step. Real change required the support of the entire community, teachers, students, and parents alike. We don't just want to improve facilities, Jamal added to Amara's plan. We want to create a new school culture. We need a learning environment where every student feels welcomed and encouraged to reach their potential. The meeting ended with new commitments, but also some doubts from those accustomed to the old ways. Amara knew that change would take time and patience, but she also knew it was time to step up and make things better. A week later, Amara began to see small changes take place. The school library was restocked with new books, the science labs were being upgraded, and workshops on new subjects were being organized. But change wasn't always smooth. Some veteran teachers felt uneasy adapting to the new curriculum, and some parents remained skeptical about the effectiveness of the reforms. One day, during a parent meeting, someone spoke up. "We know you have good intentions, but will these changes really make a difference? We don't want our children to be experiments for uncertain plans." Amara took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "We understand your concerns, but we also believe that every change requires testing and adjustment. If we don't try, we'll never know if it works." This dialogue wasn't just about reforms. It was about building trust. Amara realized that the hardest part wasn't winning in court, but persuading people to believe in her vision and be willing to work together to achieve it. While Amara focused on improving Red Oak, she also received invitations from other schools in the city. Activists and students from different neighborhoods reached out, hoping to learn from Red Oak's movement and implement reforms in their own schools. Amara realized that Red Oak was just the beginning, and that she needed to expand her influence to create wider change. One afternoon, as Amara sat with Kayla and Jamal at their usual cafe, they discussed future plans. "We've achieved something big at Red Oak," Jamal said proudly. "But there are so many other places that need change." Kayla nodded in agreement. "I think we need to create a broader coalition, connecting with other movements in the city and even nationwide. That's the only way we can create real change." Amara felt a new spark within. She knew she was no longer just a student who stood up against injustice at Red Oak. She had become a symbol of hope and change for overlooked communities everywhere. "I agree," Amara said, her eyes shining. "We won't just improve one school, we'll transform the entire system." A month after the court victory, Amara stood on a small stage at Riverwood High School, located in the eastern part of the city. The reform movement had quickly spread from Red Oak to other schools, thanks to the relentless efforts of Amara and her team. They were no longer just a small group, but a real coalition involving schools, human rights organizations, and even lawmakers concerned about educational equity. Amara looked out at the crowd where hundreds of students and teachers had gathered to hear her speak. "We all know that injustice in the education system isn't just Red Oak's story," Amara said loudly. "This is a problem for all of us, and we have the right to demand equal opportunities for every student, no matter where they come from or what their skin color is." The applause thundered, and Amara felt a profound sense of happiness. She knew that this battle wasn't just about one school. It was about changing a deeply entrenched system that needed thorough reform. After the gathering, Amara and her team organized a small meeting with representatives from other schools. Together, they discussed how to expand the movement and create a long-term strategy for educational reform across the city and potentially the entire country. "We need a clear action plan," Jamal said as they sat together in a cramped room. "We can't just demand change, we have to show how it can be implemented." Kayla added, "We need to build an inter-school network, ensuring that every school has a voice and participation in this movement. We can't rely on just one school." Amara nodded in agreement. She felt they were standing at a significant opportunity to make deeper changes, but she also recognized that new challenges would emerge as the movement grew. As the reform movement expanded, Amara faced new obstacles from the city government. Some officials began expressing dissatisfaction with the attention the movement was receiving. They warned that expanding reforms could threaten the stability of the education system and that rapid changes could lead to unforeseen consequences. One evening, Amara received a call from a high-ranking city official. He wanted to meet her to discuss how reforms could be implemented without causing disruption. "We don't deny the issues you're addressing," he said over the phone. "But we need cooperation and practicality in how these reforms are carried out." Amara agreed to meet him. She knew this meeting was a critical turning point that could shape the speed and scope of future reforms. The meeting took place in a large conference room at City Hall, where Amara sat across from the senior official and several of his advisors. "We respect your efforts," he began, his tone polite but cautious. "But are you willing to compromise to achieve a common goal?" Amara looked him straight in the eyes, her voice calm but firm. "We're willing to collaborate, but not at the cost of our core goal, equality for every student." The negotiation lasted over 2 hours, with proposals and counter-arguments from both sides. In the end, they reached an initial agreement. Reforms would be implemented gradually, with oversight from the coalition that Amara and her team had established. It was an important step forward, but Amara understood it was only the beginning of a long journey. While Amara was busy with meetings and discussions, she also faced personal changes. Her rising reputation attracted both welcome and unwelcome attention, from the media to political activists. Some began to see her as a new symbol of the education reform movement, while others criticized her as too young and inexperienced to lead such a major effort. One day, Amara received a special invitation from a national organization for educational equity. They wanted her to speak at a major conference in Washington, D.C., where legislators, researchers, and activists from across the country would be present. "This is a chance to take our story nationwide," Kayla said upon hearing the news. "But it will also be the biggest challenge you faced." Amara felt both excited and anxious. She knew that if her speech succeeded, it could open doors for broader reforms, not just at Red Oak or in Millstone, but across the country. However, she also understood that national attention would bring greater pressure than ever before. "I'll do this," Amara said with determination. "Not for myself, but for all the children like us who've been neglected for far too long." A week before the national conference in Washington, D.C., Amara sat in her living room, a notebook filled with notes and ideas for her upcoming speech in front of her. She knew this was a major opportunity to bring the story of Red Oak and her movement to a national stage. But at the same time, she felt the weight of pressure. Kayla and Jamal had come over to help Amara prepare. "Have you settled on the main idea?" Kayla asked, her voice a mix of concern and excitement. Amara nodded. "I want to emphasize that this isn't just about Red Oak, it's about all forgotten communities. We need an education system that's not only fair, but also inspires students to reach their true potential." Jamal nodded quietly, his eyes filled with pride. "You're right. This is your moment, Amara. But remember, you're not just speaking for yourself, you're speaking for all of us." Amara knew that every word she spoke would be heard by thousands, not just in the room, but also through television and other media outlets. She needed to convey her story as authentically as possible, not just as a rousing speech, but as a voice from the heart. The day of the conference finally arrived. Amara, Kayla, and Jamal boarded a plane to Washington, D.C., feeling a mix of excitement and tension. When they landed at the national airport, they were greeted by representatives of the National Educational Equity Organization that had invited Amara to speak. The night before her speech, Amara sat alone in her hotel room, gazing at the night sky over the Capitol. She felt a strange sense of loneliness, even though she knew that millions stood behind her. She was aware that the success of this speech could shape the future of the movement, but it could also draw criticism and backlash from those resistant to change. At that moment, Amara thought of her mother, Yvette, who had always supported and encouraged her, no matter how hard things got. She picked up the phone and called home. "Mom, I'm a little scared," she admitted, her voice soft and shaky. Yvette's voice was reassuring. "You've come this far, Amara. Just do what you do best. Speak from the heart." Her mother's words renewed Amara's strength. She knew that, no matter what happened, she had done everything she could to bring her community's story to light. The next morning, Amara stepped onto the main stage of the conference, facing thousands of people from across the country. She could feel both support and scrutiny, but it didn't deter her. She took a deep breath and began her speech. "I stand here today not just as a student of Red Oak," Amara said, her voice clear and strong. "I stand here as a representative of all the children this system has abandoned, those who have been denied opportunities because of the color of their skin, where they live, and the discrimination we've endured." Applause erupted from the audience, but Amara continued. "We don't just need to reform one school or one district. We need to reform the entire system. We need an education system that leaves no one behind, that doesn't treat anyone as an outsider. This is about the future of this country, about true fairness." She concluded with a powerful call to action. If we don't stand up for our children, who will? If not now, then when? And if not us, then who? Thunderous applause filled the hall, with many standing up, cheering, and chanting her name. Amara felt an overwhelming surge of support and knew that she had succeeded. She had not only delivered her message, but had also ignited a new spirit of unity within the education reform movement. After her speech, Amara received a flood of invitations from various organizations, legislators, and researchers who wanted to collaborate on implementing broader reforms. She was also invited to join education committees and became a spokesperson for the National Movement for Educational Equity. However, Amara's success also drew harsh criticism from those who supported the current system. They argued that she was too young to fully understand the complexities of education reform and accused her of complicating already difficult issues. Some conservative media outlets even labeled her as a reckless youth, criticizing the movement's strategies as overly idealistic. Amara remained undeterred by these criticisms. She understood that opposition was part of the struggle, and that if she wanted to create real change, she had to persist. In an interview after the conference, when asked about the criticisms, she smiled gently. "If you want to change the world, you have to be ready to face both support and opposition. What matters is never losing faith in your goal." When Amara returned from Washington, D.C., she found that the movement had become a national wave, with dozens of cities beginning to adopt similar reform measures. Lawmakers started proposing bills to improve educational equity on a wider scale, and the story of Red Oak became a symbol of change. At a group meeting in the community center, Kayla looked at Amara with pride. "You did it, Amara. You brought our story to the world." Amara smiled, her eyes still determined. "This is just the beginning, Kayla. We have a lot more work to do, not just at Red Oak, but everywhere." Amara knew that, despite significant progress, the fight for educational justice was far from over. But she also knew she was not alone. She had a strong coalition, a supportive community, and most importantly, a deep belief that change was possible, with enough determination and courage to face every challenge. A year after the national conference, Amara had become one of the most prominent young activists for educational equity in the U.S. She was recognized not only by her community, but also received awards from multiple organizations for her relentless efforts to bring the story of Red Oak to the national stage. She joined federal education committees, participating in drafting new policies aimed at improving equality in education. Amara and her team managed to implement several significant reforms in the education system, including increased investment in underprivileged schools, ensuring more equitable funding, reduced harsh disciplinary measures, which disproportionately affected students of color, promoted diverse teacher programs, allowing students to learn from educators who understood their cultural backgrounds and circumstances, improved curriculum content, integrating the histories of minority communities into mainstream education. Red Oak became a symbol of change, featuring advanced academic programs, modern laboratories, and a well-stocked library. Amara saw a noticeable difference. Students at Red Oak were more confident, engaged, and had better opportunities to develop their talents. One morning, Amara received a handwritten letter from a young student in another city. The letter, written with youthful penmanship, was heartfelt. "Dear Amara, I read about your story in Red Oak. I really admire what you've done. My school is facing the same challenges Red Oak once did. I want to know what I can do to change this place." Amara was moved by the letter. It reminded her of herself a few years back, as a Red Oak student filled with dreams and anger at the injustice she and her peers faced. She decided to write back, not just with words of encouragement, but practical advice on how to start a movement from scratch. "Start with the small things," Amara wrote. "Find like-minded people who share your vision and are willing to fight alongside you. Never let anyone tell you that you can't change anything. Every major revolution begins with small steps." In the years that followed, Amara continued leading education reform movements across the United States. She became a young legislator, elected to the State Board of Education, where she could directly influence policy decisions. The reforms she fought for didn't stop at Red Oak. They spread to other states, creating a profound wave of change in national education. But it wasn't always smooth sailing. Amara and her movement faced strong pushback from defenders of the status quo, who feared that rapid changes could disrupt both education and society. At times, she faced personal attacks and even threats from interest groups. Once, during a protest against her proposed reforms, Amara stood her ground. She knew that change was a long, challenging journey, but also a meaningful one. In a speech before the agitated crowd, she affirmed, "We don't change to destroy, we change to build a fairer future for everyone. Every step forward, no matter how small or big, is a sign of hope." By the time Amara turned 30, she had achieved remarkable success, but she never forgot her early days at Red Oak. She returned to the school for a ceremony celebrating its achievements after a decade of reforms. The school had been transformed, with new buildings, large playgrounds, and modern classrooms. In her final speech to the students and teachers of Red Oak, Amara looked at the bright young faces before her. "I was once one of you, sitting in these very seats, dreaming of fairness and change. And I am here today to tell you, dreams are never too big. If we believe in something and are determined to pursue it, there is nothing we cannot achieve." The crowd erupted in applause, and Amara felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had come a long way from those early days of standing up for justice, and now she could see the fruits of her persistence and courage. Yet she also knew that her journey was not over. Educational equity was a continuous goal, a road that never truly ends. "Every generation has its mission," Amara told the crowd, "and I believe that your generation will take our dreams even further." As the sun set over Red Oak, Amara left the campus with a heart full of hope and faith. She knew she had not only changed one school but transformed thousands of lives, opening doors to a fairer future for all. Amara's story ends with the success of education reform, not just at Red Oak but across the United States. She became a symbol of courage, determination, and hope for millions of students and families. Her journey was not just about one individual, but about a new generation rising against injustice and changing the world with love and perseverance. The story of Amara concludes, but her dream continues, because justice is not a final destination, but a never-ending journey. Thank you for following Amara's inspiring journey. This story clearly demonstrates that when we overcome biases and change perspectives, life becomes much brighter and more meaningful. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy stories that are motivational and deep like this one, don't forget to subscribe to TMI Stories to continue this journey with me in upcoming videos. And remember to turn on notifications so you don't miss any future content. Thank you again for your support, and I'll see you in the next meaningful story.